My wife's sister moved into our home, and within weeks she acted like she owned everything. I stayed quiet, even when I was pushed to the couch for months. But what they didn't know was that I had cameras hidden in every corner, and the footage revealed something so shocking it almost cost me everything. Before we start the story, comment below where in the world you're watching from today. And if you enjoy this kind of story, don't forget to subscribe and turn on the bell icon so you never miss the next one. My name is Colin, and I had always believed that if I worked hard, paid the bills on time, and kept my family safe, then life at home would stay steady. My wife's name is Laura, and for 15 years, we built a quiet life together in our small 2-story house. I loved the smell of her morning coffee and the way she always left the porch light on if I worked late. But things began to change the day her sister, Grace, showed up at our door with 2 heavy suitcases and a tone that made it clear she wasn't asking permission to stay. Laura had just learned her father was very sick in another state, and her emotions were raw. Grace walked in, hugged her tightly, and said, "He needs real family support now." Laura nodded through tears, and I stayed quiet, though the words made me feel like I was already being pushed aside. Grace moved into the guest room that night, saying it would only be for a little while. At first, it seemed harmless. She cooked a few meals, cleaned the kitchen, and even told neighbors she was helping us keep things steady. But within a week, I noticed how she slipped into control without asking. My favorite chair in the living room was suddenly her reading spot. She changed the shelves in the kitchen so I couldn't find anything where it used to be. My toolbox was moved from the garage corner where I had kept it for years. Laura brushed it off, saying, "It's just her way of helping, Colin." I wanted to believe her, but it was starting to feel like Grace was writing the rules. The nights grew worse. Grace and Laura would close the door to the guest room and whisper long after I had gone to bed. I could hear their voices through the thin walls, but never the words. Laura told me it was just sister talk, but the unease stayed with me. Then one night, Laura quietly suggested, "Maybe you should sleep on the couch until things settle." I agreed without arguing, but lying there staring at the ceiling fan, I felt the weight of being a stranger in my own home. I folded the blanket on that couch every morning, pretending it was only for a few nights. But days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months. Grace's voice filled every corner of the house, telling us how the bills should be handled, what groceries were best, and which room should be used for what. What neither Laura nor Grace knew was that before Grace ever came to stay, I had installed cameras around the house. Not because of them. Months earlier, after a break-in on our street, I wanted to feel secure when we were away. The small black lenses blended into corners and shelves, easy to forget about. As I lay awake on the couch, night after night, the thought crept stronger into my mind. Maybe those cameras were seeing what I wasn't. And maybe, just maybe, the silence I kept was the very thing that would reveal the truth. The weeks stretched into a blur, and Grace's presence became heavier with each passing day. She wasn't a guest anymore. She acted like the owner. She started changing the locks on the back door, saying it was for safety. She created chore lists and stuck them on the fridge, handwriting notes about who should do the dishes and when laundry needed to be folded. Except those notes were always directed at me. Laura seemed relieved by it, almost thankful, as if Grace was saving her from responsibilities she no longer wanted to carry. I kept my mouth shut, telling myself that Laura was stressed about her father, and I didn't want to make things harder for her. But the truth was, every night on that couch felt like a punishment for staying silent. I began noticing how conversations were no longer between Laura and me. Grace always inserted herself, finishing Laura's sentences, making decisions as if my opinion didn't matter. When we had friends over one Saturday, Grace poured the wine and said, "Colin has been struggling a bit, but we're keeping things in order." Everyone laughed politely, but I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. I wanted to argue, to set things straight, but Laura smiled weakly and didn't correct her. It was the first time I realized I wasn't just being ignored, I was being erased. At night, when the house went quiet, I would unlock my phone and scroll through the saved camera feeds. I hadn't told anyone about them, not even Laura. The hallway view showed Grace walking back and forth after midnight. The kitchen camera captured her going through drawers and stuffing papers into a tote bag. At first, I told myself maybe she was organizing, but a growing suspicion gnawed at me. Then, one night, I saw something that turned my unease into certainty. Grace, standing at the front door with a man I didn't recognize, whispering and handing him what looked like a small envelope. She checked the hallway twice before opening the door, unaware the tiny lens above the coat rack was watching. My stomach tightened as I replayed the clip over and over. It wasn't just her controlling our house, it was something deeper. I realized I wasn't only losing my place in the home. I might be losing the home itself. The morning after I saw that clip, the house felt different to me. Every word Grace spoke sounded heavy. Up casually, asking Laura if she noticed Grace going out at odd hours. Laura frowned and shook her head. "She's just restless," she said softly. "She's here to help, Colin. Don't start imagining things." Her words stung, not because she doubted me, but because she trusted Grace more than she trusted her own husband. That night, I checked the footage again. The hallway camera caught Grace entering the guest room with a stack of my mail. Some of the envelopes were ones I had been looking for: credit card statements, insurance notices, and even a letter from the bank. She sat at the small desk in her room, carefully photographing each paper with her phone. Then she slid them into a folder labeled with my name. Watching her handle my private mail made my hands tremble. I realized she wasn't just invading our home, she was slipping her hands into our lives piece by piece. The next few days, she became bolder. She told Laura that the bills should now come to her email, so things won't get lost. She told me my office space would be better used as storage, and began stacking boxes where my desk once stood. When I tried to object, Laura gave me that tired look again and whispered, "Please, just go along for now." I wanted to shout, to drag Grace out of the house, but instead, I nodded, biting down on my anger. Back on the couch that night, the truth hit me. Grace wasn't helping us at all. She was preparing something, and I didn't know if Laura even realized she was being pulled into it. The cameras were catching pieces of her plan, but I still didn't see the whole picture. All I knew was that if I didn't act soon, I might not have a house left to fight for. The more I watched, the clearer it became that Grace was not just settling in, she was laying claim. One evening I came home from work and found the locks on the front door changed. My old key didn't fit. When I knocked, Grace opened the door with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, the locksmith came earlier," she explained casually. "It was for safety. Don't worry, I have a new key for you." She dangled it in front of me like she was doing me a favor. My chest burned, but Laura stood right behind her, nodding nervously. So I swallowed my anger and stepped inside. Later that night, when Laura was asleep, I checked the hallway footage. It showed Grace standing with the locksmith at the door, whispering instructions while he installed the new lock. The camera picked up her words, "Make sure I'm the primary contact." Hearing it made my blood run cold. She wasn't just securing the house, she was making it hers. Over the next week, she started making household announcements as though she were the one in charge. "We'll be changing the grocery list from now on," she told me while stacking food in the pantry. "No more unnecessary snacks." She assigned chores, rearranged the living room, and even told Laura that the master bathroom should be hers because she had more things to keep organized. Laura hesitated, but eventually agreed. That night I carried my pillow to the couch again, feeling the walls of my own house closing in. The footage didn't stop at keys and mail. One clip showed her on the phone late at night, whispering to someone. He's almost out of the picture. By the time he notices, it'll be too late. I replayed those words again and again until they were carved into my mind. She wasn't just pushing me aside. She was planning to erase me completely. And Laura, blinded by trust, couldn't see it. The tension in the house grew thicker every day. Grace acted like a queen and Laura followed along, as if her sister's voice carried more weight than mine. I felt like a guest who had overstayed his welcome. My clothes were moved from the closet to a small hall dresser, and Grace laughed when I asked why. "More space for Laura," she said lightly, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Laura stood by silently, and that silence hurt worse than any insult. I tried to cling to normal routines, watering the plants in the morning, reading the newspaper at the kitchen table, but even those small things were interrupted. Grace shifted the plants to the back porch, saying they were messy. She tossed the paper into the recycling before I even finished the headlines. It was like she was erasing every trace of me piece by piece. The cameras told me what my eyes couldn't. One night I watched as Grace went through the filing cabinet in my old office. She flipped through our mortgage papers, bank records, and even the deed to the house. She photographed every page with careful precision, then tucked them back as though nothing had been touched. My chest tightened when I saw Laura walk in midway. Instead of questioning her, Laura sat beside her, nodding as Grace explained something I couldn't hear. The next morning, Grace announced at breakfast, "We're going to need to think about what happens if things get harder for Laura. I'll be here to handle the house." Laura looked down at her plate, but she didn't disagree. That moment told me the truth. Grace wasn't preparing to leave. She was preparing to take over. And if I kept saying nothing, she might succeed. That night, lying on the couch with the cameras still recording, I knew I had two choices: confront her without proof and risk Laura turning against me, or keep gathering evidence until there was no way she could deny it. I chose the second, even though every day of silence felt like another nail sealing me out of my own home. The house no longer felt like mine. Grace's voice filled every corner: what time the lights should be turned off, which groceries we could afford, even how often I should use the car. She spoke with such certainty that Laura barely questioned her. At dinner one night, Grace looked at me across the table and said, "It's better if you focus on work and let us handle the household matters. You'll thank me later." Laura reached for her hand in agreement, and I sat there staring at my plate, feeling like a stranger at a table I had paid for. That night, the cameras gave me another piece of the puzzle. At 1:12 a.m., the kitchen camera caught Grace pouring herself a glass of wine while talking on the phone. Her voice was low but clear enough. "The paperwork is almost lined up. He's not paying attention. By the time it's ready, the house will be secure under my control." My chest went cold. She wasn't just helping with bills. She was trying to make herself the owner. I checked the footage from the hallway camera. At 1:47 a.m., she slipped into Laura's room and whispered for nearly an hour. I couldn't hear the words, but Laura nodded again and again, her face pale in the dim light. When Grace left, Laura lay awake, staring at the ceiling, looking more like a child being told what to do than a wife making her own choices. The next morning, Grace announced that she had scheduled a meeting with a notary for the following week. She brushed it off as just paperwork for emergencies. But the pit in my stomach told me otherwise. I wanted to scream, to slam my hands on the table, but instead I simply said, "All right," and excused myself. Back on the couch that night, the blanket pulled up to my chin. I realized the cameras weren't just showing me her lies. They were giving me the only weapon I had left. And if I didn't use that weapon soon, I might wake up one morning to find my name missing from every paper that tied me to the house. By now, every part of me was screaming to act, but I knew one wrong move could push Laura further onto her sister's side. So I focused on building proof. Each night after they went to bed, I sat with my laptop and copied clips onto a separate hard drive. I labeled folders by date and time: the lock change, the stolen mail, the whispered phone calls. The more I collected, the more I realized Grace was carefully weaving a net around me. She wasn't rushing. She was patient, steady, and confident that I would stay silent. The footage kept showing her patterns. At 10:32 one evening, she pulled out my bank card from the drawer where I normally kept it. She held it up to Laura and said, "See, he won't even notice. I'll handle the bills." Laura didn't argue. She actually thanked her. My throat tightened watching it back. I thought of every overtime shift I had worked to keep our savings intact, and now the woman who hadn't contributed a dime was sliding her hands into it as if it were hers. 2 nights later, I caught something even worse. Grace sat at the kitchen table with a stranger I had never seen before. A man in a suit spread documents across the wood surface. Grace pointed at certain lines while Laura sat quietly beside her, biting her lip. I zoomed in on the footage and froze when I saw the header on one of the pages. Property transfer. My chest hammered so hard I thought I'd wake the whole house. I closed the laptop and sat in the dark, my fists clenched. There was no more guessing now. Grace wasn't helping us. She was preparing to take everything. If I didn't stop her, I'd lose not only my place in this home, but the roof over my head entirely. And still I kept silent, letting her believe I was blind. Because when the time came, the evidence would speak louder than anything I could ever say. The days that followed felt like walking on glass. Grace acted more confident than ever, moving around the house like she owned it. She started introducing herself to neighbors as if she were the one running things, even calling the place our home, when Laura stood beside her. I could see the way people looked at me, confused, pitying, like I had lost control of everything. And in truth, I had. Outwardly, I stayed calm, but every night I went back to the footage, and the story unfolding there was worse than anything I imagined. One clip showed Grace opening my desk drawer and pulling out the deed to the house. She smoothed it on the table, tapped a finger against my name, and whispered to Laura, "Once this is handled, he won't be able to touch it." Laura's face was pale, uncertain, but she didn't stop her. My hands shook, replaying that moment over and over. The house I worked my whole life for was being stripped from me in my sleep. Another night, just after midnight, the hallway camera caught Grace pacing with her phone pressed to her ear. "Yes, the meeting's set for Friday. He's clueless. By next week, the house will be secured. Trust me, it's practically mine already." I stared at the time stamp, 12:41 a.m., and felt my stomach twist. She wasn't hiding her plan. She was confident enough to speak it aloud. I added these clips to the folder, each one a nail in the coffin of her lies. But I also knew evidence alone wouldn't save me if I didn't use it at the right moment. The cameras had shown me the truth. Now the question was how to reveal it so neither Grace nor Laura could deny what she had done. One wrong step, and everything I had gathered could be brushed away like dust. One right step, and the house would be mine again. Friday came faster than I expected, and the house carried a strange kind of silence that morning, like even the walls knew something was about to break. Grace had been buzzing with energy all week, speaking in half sentences on the phone and scribbling notes on pieces of paper she tucked into her purse. She moved through the house with a smugness that made my stomach twist. Laura followed her almost everywhere, listening, nodding, and saying less and less to me. It was as if Grace had put up an invisible wall between us, one I couldn't cross no matter how hard I tried. The night before, I stayed awake long after they'd gone, watching the latest clips from the cameras. The kitchen feed showed Grace rifling through the mail again, holding a letter with my name on it. She scanned it, snapped a photo, then tucked it into her own folder. A little later, she met Laura in the living room, and the two of them sat side by side as Grace whispered, "Tomorrow is important. Don't get nervous. Just agree, and I'll handle the rest." Laura nodded, her hands trembling in her lap. At 2:17 a.m., the hallway camera caught something that made my chest lock up. Grace walked into the guest room with a notary packet in her hand. She laid it out on the desk, flipped to the page marked with a sticky note, and quietly rehearsed words to herself. His name off, my name on, his rights void. She whispered those lines like a chant, and I felt the weight of every word press against me. I copied the footage onto my drive and sat back, staring at the blank wall. My heart pounded, not from fear anymore, but from the realization that the moment to act had finally come. I couldn't keep watching her dismantle my life piece by piece. The proof was strong enough now that no excuses, no smooth words, and no fake smiles could cover it up. The next morning, as I poured myself a coffee and set the mug down on the counter, Grace strolled in like a landlady making her rounds. "We'll be heading out around 11, she said with a confident smirk. "Just some paperwork Laura and I need to get in order." She didn't even look at me, as if I were furniture in the room. Laura followed close behind, eyes down, holding her purse tight against her side. I nodded slowly, pretending not to care. "All right," I said calmly, but inside I was already planning my next move, because by the time they came back from that meeting, I was going to have everything ready. The footage, the papers, and the truth that neither of them could run from. That couch I'd been forced to sleep on for months had taught me patience. Now it was time to put that patience to use. The game Grace thought she was winning was about to turn, and she had no idea every step she had taken was already caught on camera. That Friday morning, after they left for their so-called paperwork meeting, I sat alone in the kitchen with the hard drive in front of me. The house was quiet, but not peaceful. It felt like a stage after the actors had gone, with props left behind, a half-empty coffee cup, a purse strap hanging from a chair, and the smell of Grace's strong perfume still lingering in the hallway. For months I had kept my silence, swallowing anger and humiliation while they stripped my place in the house away one piece at a time. But now I finally felt the shift. I wasn't powerless anymore. I had proof, and I had a plan. I opened the folder on my laptop that I had been building for weeks. Inside were clips labeled in neat order. Lock change, 8:45 p.m. Mail theft, 10:11 p.m. Kitchen, meeting 12:41 a.m. Notary rehearsal, 2:17 a.m. Each file was a piece of the puzzle that showed what Grace had been doing in the shadows. Watching them all lined up like that gave me a strange calmness, the kind a man feels when he knows he is about to walk into a storm but finally has a shield. The most damning footage was the late-night rehearsal. Grace holding the notary packet, tapping her finger on the line where my name was printed, whispering, "His name off, my name on, his rights void." I could already picture Laura's face when she saw her sister caught on camera saying those words. For weeks, Laura had trusted Grace blindly, nodding to her instructions, agreeing to her demands. But trust can't stand against truth when the truth is right in front of your eyes. Around noon, the sound of the front door opening broke my thoughts. Grace's heels clicked against the hardwood floor, and Laura followed quietly behind her. They were laughing like two people who had just gotten away with something. Grace held a slim folder in her hand, tucking it under her arm as she headed straight to the guest room. Laura avoided my eyes as she slipped into the kitchen and busied herself with the kettle, her hands trembling more than usual. I didn't say a word. Instead, I went to the living room, powered on the television, and connected my laptop with the HDMI cable. The big screen flickered, then lit up with the first clip, the locksmith changing the locks. I let it play on mute, waiting for Grace to return. When she finally walked in, still clutching that folder, her smile faltered. Her eyes darted to the screen, then to me, then back again. Laura froze in the doorway, staring at the image of her sister, whispering to the locksmith, "Make sure I'm the primary contact." "What is this?" Grace asked, her voice sharp but shaky. I didn't answer. I pressed play on the next clip. The footage showed her going through my mail, photographing my bank statements. Then the kitchen scene appeared, her voice clear as she told someone on the phone. "By next week, the house will be secured under my control." Laura's face drained of color. She whispered, "Grace, what is this?" But Grace snapped back, "It's taken out of context. He's twisting this." I didn't respond. I just cued the final clip, the notary rehearsal. The sound filled the living room as Grace's own whisper echoed through the speakers. His name off. My name on. His rights void. The folder slipped from her hand and landed on the carpet with a dull thud. Laura covered her mouth, eyes wide, shaking her head as if she couldn't believe what she had just heard. Grace stepped forward, desperate now. Laura, listen to me. This isn't what it looks like. I was protecting us. But Laura cut her off, her voice breaking for the first time in months. Protecting us? You were stealing from him, from both of us. Grace's face twisted, her confident mask slipping away as she realized her plan had been caught from every angle. She turned her glare on me, but I stayed calm, leaning back on the couch I had been forced to sleep on for nearly 90 nights. You should have remembered, I said quietly. Walls may have ears, but this house has eyes. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. Grace had no words left, and Laura had no defense to give her. The house, for the first time in months, finally felt like it belonged to me again. But this wasn't over. The confrontation had just begun, and the fallout was about to change everything. Grace didn't leave right away. She stood in the middle of the living room, folder at her feet, her face pale but still trying to recover her composure. Laura sat on the edge of the couch next to me, her hands shaking so badly that she could barely hold her cup of tea. I kept the footage paused on the television screen, the frame frozen on Grace's face as she rehearsed those chilling words about my name being removed. The silence in the room was so thick it felt like the walls were listening. Colin, you don't understand, Grace finally said, her voice softer, like she was trying to slip into the same smooth tone she had used for months. This wasn't about stealing. It was about protecting Laura. You've been stressed, distracted, and she needed someone strong to handle things. She took a step forward, her eyes darting to her sister, hoping to still reel her in. I only wanted what was best for you both. But Laura's face betrayed her. She wasn't convinced anymore. She kept glancing at the television, back at me, then at Grace. I had seen that expression before on Laura, the look she got when she realized she had put trust in the wrong place. Grace, how could you? She whispered, her voice cracked, and tears welled in her eyes. Grace moved quickly, kneeling in front of Laura, grabbing her hands like a desperate child. Don't listen to him. He's twisting things. You know me, Laura. I would never hurt you. I leaned forward, my tone calm but firm, no anger in it, just truth. Then explain the locksmith making you the primary contact. Explain the phone call about securing the house. Explain that packet you rehearsed in the middle of the night. I didn't twist anything, Grace. You said those words yourself. You wanted my name off, my rights void. Her jaw tightened, and for the first time since she walked into our house, her confidence cracked. She pulled her hands back from Laura and stood up, pacing the room. Fine, she snapped. Yes, I said those things. But you have no idea what it's like watching someone you love waste away in silence. You sleep on the couch every night like a martyr. You don't fight back. You don't even defend yourself. I had to laugh at the twisted reasoning. But I didn't. I let the weight of her words sit in the air because Laura needed to hear them without interruption. Laura stared at her sister like she was seeing her for the first time, her mouth slightly open, her cheeks wet with tears. You filled it? Laura's voice was shaking now. You pushed him out. You took over everything. You made me think it was helping when all the while you were planning to take our home. Grace's face flushed red. Don't be dramatic. It wasn't just for me. I was securing it for both of us, you and me. Do you think he could have handled it? Do you think he would have kept this house if things got worse? He would have lost it all. I was protecting what you deserve. That was the breaking point for Laura. She stood up suddenly, her chair scraping the floor. "What I deserve? What Colin deserves? Do you even hear yourself, Grace? You've been living here for months, treating him like he's invisible, and now you want me to believe you were protecting us? You weren't protecting anyone but yourself." Grace flinched, as if the words were a slap. She tried one last time, lowering her tone again. "Laura, please, don't let him turn you against me. You know me better than anyone. I love you. I did this for you." Laura shook her head, her shoulders trembling. "No, you did this for control. You took advantage of me when I was vulnerable, and you used my pain to push him out. I can't believe I let you do this." The silence that followed was deafening. Grace's eyes flicked to me, full of fury now. "You think you've won," she hissed. "But this isn't over." I stood slowly, finally feeling the strength that had been buried under months of silence. "It is over, Grace. You're done here. You're not welcome in this house anymore." Her lips curled into a sneer, but she could see in my face and Laura's that the game was finished. She bent down, snatched the folder from the carpet, and stormed toward the guest room. A few minutes later, the sound of drawers slamming and suitcases being zipped filled the hallway. Laura sank back onto the couch, her whole body shaking. I sat beside her, not touching her yet, giving her the space to process. For months, she had been tangled in her sister's web, and now the strands were falling apart around her. She finally turned to me, her eyes filled with guilt. "Colin, I don't know what to say. I should have seen it. I should have listened to you." I shook my head. "She's your sister. You wanted to believe the best of her. That's not a weakness, Laura. That's love. But she crossed a line too far this time." Tears spilled down her cheeks as she whispered, "I let her push you out. I made you sleep on that couch like she was afraid I would vanish if she let go." The sound of Grace's suitcase wheels clattering down the hall broke the moment. She appeared in the doorway with her bags, her face hard and unreadable. "You'll regret this," she said flatly, her eyes on me. Then she turned to Laura. "And so will you." Laura didn't answer. She just turned her face away, refusing to give Grace any more of her voice. That silence was louder than any words could have been. Grace yanked the front door open, dragging her suitcases across the porch, and slammed it behind her. For the first time in months, the house didn't echo with her presence. The silence that followed was heavy, but it wasn't the same suffocating silence I had felt on the couch. This silence was different. It was the beginning of peace. Laura leaned against me, her head on my shoulder. "I don't know if I can forgive her," she whispered. "You don't have to," I replied softly. "Not today, not tomorrow, maybe not ever. What matters is she's gone, and this house is ours again." For the first time since Grace had arrived, I believed my own words. The house felt like mine again, like ours again. The battle wasn't finished. There would be fallout, there always is. But in that moment, with the cameras still watching silently from their corners, I knew the truth had won. And truth, once revealed, cannot be hidden again. After Grace slammed the door and dragged her bags down the porch steps, Laura and I sat in silence for a long time. The house didn't feel the same. It was quieter, but not the peaceful kind of quiet I had hoped for. It was the quiet after a storm, where broken branches still litter the ground and the air smells of rain and dirt. I kept my arm around Laura, but my mind was racing. Months of control, manipulation, and betrayal weren't going to vanish just because Grace had left with a suitcase. What she had set in motion still lingered in the air like smoke. Laura was the first to break the silence. "She'll come back," she whispered, almost to herself. "Grace doesn't give up. She never has." I nodded. "She might try, but she won't get in again. Not this time." I meant it. I had already decided the first thing I would do the next morning was call a locksmith of my own. Grace had changed the locks once, but I would have them changed again. This time with me as the only primary contact. She had slipped in under the guise of family support, and I wasn't going to leave even the smallest crack open for her to wedge herself back through. But I also knew changing locks wasn't enough. Grace had been digging through our mail, copying documents, photographs. Laura tried to sleep in our bed again, but she tossed and turned, clutching the pillow like it was the only thing holding her together. I lay awake beside her, staring at the ceiling. My mind replayed everything, her voice rehearsing his name off, my name on, his rights void. The memory gnawed at me. At 3 a.m., I got up quietly and went to the living room. I plugged in the hard drive and opened the folder again. Clip after clip filled the screen, all of them tiny pieces of truth Grace had hoped no one would ever see. I replayed the footage of her at the kitchen table with that unknown man in a suit. His face was partly turned away from the camera, but I could see enough. Whoever he wasn't a neighbor. He wasn't a friend. He was professional. His neat clothes, his polished shoes, the way he pointed at the pages with a pen. A man like that wasn't there by accident. He was there for business. The next day, as promised, I called a locksmith. A different one. By noon, every lock in the house was replaced, and this time, I stood right beside the man while he worked, watching each screw turned, each key cut. When he handed me the new set, he said, "Only you are listed as contact, no one else." Hearing those words gave me a satisfaction I hadn't felt in months. But locks were just doors. The real threat was still on paper. I took the hard drive and made 2 copies. One I locked in the fireproof box in the closet, and another I placed in a safety deposit box at the bank. Then I made an appointment with a lawyer, a man I had worked with years ago when I first bought the house. When Laura and I sat across from him 2 days later, I laid the evidence on his desk. I didn't sugarcoat it. I showed him the clips, the rehearsed notary scene, the photographed mail. His eyes narrowed, and he tapped his pen against his notebook. She was preparing to shift ownership. If she had managed to convince your wife to sign something under pressure, you'd be looking at a nightmare right now. Fortunately, you caught it before it moved forward. Laura sat quietly beside me, her hands folded in her lap. She looked so small in that chair, her face drawn and tired. When the lawyer asked if she had signed anything, her voice cracked as she shook her head. No. She kept telling me not to worry about the details, that she'd guide me through. But I never signed anything. Relief flooded me, but the lawyer's next words still carried weight. "You need to take action now. File a notice with the county recorder's office that prevents any change of ownership without your approval. You'll also want to alert your bank and make sure no new lines of credit have been opened in your names." We left the office that day with a stack of paperwork and a clear plan. It felt like pulling weeds from a garden after someone had tried to choke it out. Slow, careful, but necessary. Back at home, Laura finally spoke about what had been gnawing at her. She sat on the edge of the bed, her shoulders slumped, and said, "I let her control me, Colin. I let her control everything. I thought she was helping. I thought she was protecting me when I couldn't think straight about Dad. But she was just taking." I sat beside her. "You trusted her because she was your sister. You weren't wrong to hope she'd stand by you, but she crossed a line no family should ever cross." Tears filled her eyes. "I don't know if I can forgive her." "Then don't," I said quietly. "Forgiveness isn't owed, protection is, and I'll make sure she never gets another chance to take this house or you away from me." For the next week, I became a man on guard. I checked the cameras every night, though part of me wondered if it was even necessary anymore. Grace was gone, but shadows of her lingered in every corner. The guest room she had claimed, the pantry she had rearranged, the bathroom she had tried to take over. Laura and I began slowly reclaiming those spaces. I moved my clothes back into our closet. I brought my desk back into the office. Laura unpacked the guest room, folding away the bedsheets her sister had used. Each act felt like laying bricks back into the foundation of our lives. Still, I couldn't shake the unease. Grace had left too easily. She hadn't screamed or begged her way back in. She had left with threats instead. "You'll regret this, and so will you." Those words followed me, echoing in my head. Because someone like Grace doesn't vanish quietly. She plots in silence. She waits. And though the locks were changed, the papers secured, and Laura back at my side, I knew in my gut this wasn't finished. Grace had tried once to steal our home and almost succeeded. What was stopping her from trying again in another way? That night, as I shut down the laptop and set the hard drive back in the safe, I whispered to myself, "This time I'm ready." Because if Grace came back, and I knew she would, I had more than cameras now. I had proof. I had the law, and I had a wife who finally saw the truth for herself. And sometimes that's all it takes to turn a house back into a home. But I also knew one thing more. Grace wasn't done, and the next time she showed her face, she wouldn't just be fighting me. She'd be fighting both of us. The first week after Grace was gone felt like learning how to breathe again. The house was quiet in a way that almost felt foreign. No chore lists taped to the fridge, no midnight whispers through the walls, no perfume clinging to the hallway. Laura and I tried to settle back into our old rhythm, but it was clear something had changed between us. The couch still sat there in the living room, a reminder of months when I wasn't allowed in my own bed. Every time I walked past it, I felt the ache of betrayal, not only Grace's but Laura's silence too. Laura noticed it as much as I did. One evening while we sat at the dinner table, she reached across and touched my hand. "I hate myself for letting it get this far," she said softly. "I kept thinking I was doing the right thing by trusting her. I thought she was protecting us. I didn't see she was pulling us apart." I looked at her, tired lines etched into her face from weeks of stress, and for the first time I saw not just my wife, but someone who had been as much a victim as I was. Grace had manipulated both of us, each in different ways. "She's your sister," I told her quietly. "You wanted to believe in her. That's not a crime. But letting her back in would be." Laura nodded, squeezing my hand. "She won't come back here, I promise you that." But I wasn't so sure. Grace wasn't the type to slink away in shame. She had left with anger in her eyes and a folder of papers under her arm. And every night, when the house grew dark, I thought about that unknown man in the suit who had sat at our kitchen table with her. I thought about the photographs of our mortgage and the whispered phone calls about securing the house. I couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't finished, just regrouping. To prepare, I spent the next few days going through every corner of the house she had touched. In the guest room, I emptied drawers and found scraps of paper, lists written in her sharp handwriting. Utilities, groceries, insurance, notary, deed. Each word felt like a nail she had been trying to hammer into our lives. In the office, I checked the filing cabinet and found a sticky note tucked between folders. It read, "Don't forget Friday. Bring Laura's ID." I held it in my hand, my chest tightening at the thought that if Laura had gone just one step further, Grace might have already trapped us both. Laura walked in while I was staring at the note. Her face fell. "She planned everything," she whispered. "She was using me like a key." I put the note into the growing binder of evidence. That's exactly what she was doing, but now we know better and we're not going to let her try again. The next week, we went back to the lawyer who helped us file additional protections. We placed alerts on all our accounts, blocked unauthorized changes, and secured our home insurance with a clause requiring both our signatures for any modification. The lawyer even suggested a restraining order if Grace tried to step foot back into the house. Laura hesitated at that. After all, Grace was her sister. But I could see in her eyes that she understood why it might come to that. Still, life moved forward in small steps. I moved my clothes back into the closet, reclaiming my space beside Laura's. We redecorated the living room, replacing the blanket I had used on the couch with a new one, brighter and softer, chosen by Laura. It was her way of saying, "This house belongs to us again." Slowly, meals together stopped feeling forced. Conversations became easier, and laughter returned in little bursts, though never quite as freely as before. Then, one afternoon, the phone rang. Laura answered, and I heard her voice catch. "Grace?" she said, her tone tight. I froze where I was, straining to hear. Laura listened for a long moment, then said firmly, "No, you're not coming back. Not ever." She hung up, her hands trembling. I stepped closer. What did she say? Laura's eyes filled with tears. She said she made a mistake, that she was sorry, that Dad would want us to stay together as a family. But then, she paused, her throat tightening. She said if we didn't forgive her, we'd regret it. Those last words hit me like a stone. Grace wasn't apologizing. She was warning us. That night I checked the cameras again, even though I knew she was gone. Every feed showed empty hallways, quiet rooms, locked doors. But the memory of her whispering in the kitchen with that man haunted me. I knew she wasn't finished. People like Grace don't vanish when caught. They wait, they scheme, they look for another angle. I sat Laura down at the table and said, "If she tries to come back, we call the police. No more second chances, no more listening to her stories. She crossed a line, and she'll do it again if we let her." Laura nodded, but her face was heavy with sorrow. "She's still my sister," she whispered. I reached across the table and held her hand. "And I'm your husband, and this is our house. We can't lose it again." That night, as we turned off the lights and climbed into bed, I felt Laura curl close against me, clinging tighter than she had in months. The shadows of Grace still lingered in the corners of our home, but the bond between us was mending. And as I closed my eyes, one thought burned steady in my mind. If Grace dared to step foot on our porch again, the house itself would bear witness. Because the cameras were still watching, and this time, so was Laura. The call from Grace had been only the beginning. In the days that followed, little ripples of her presence began to spread through our lives again, even though she wasn't physically in the house anymore. It started small, odd letters in the mail, strange phone calls, and whispers from neighbors who suddenly seemed to know more about our private life than we had ever told them. It was clear she hadn't simply accepted defeat. She was striking from the outside now, using whatever weapons she could find. One afternoon, I came home from work to find Laura sitting at the kitchen table, staring down at an opened envelope. Her face was pale, her hands trembling as she pushed the paper toward me. "It's a past due notice," she whispered. "But we paid this bill last month, didn't we?" I scanned the letter, my chest tightening. It wasn't just a notice, it was a demand for payment, threatening late fees and potential service. Paid it. The letter wasn't a mistake. It was deliberate. Someone had meddled, and I didn't have to guess who. That night I checked the cameras again, not because I expected to see Grace inside, but because I wanted reassurance she hadn't somehow crept back. The feeds showed only shadows of an ordinary house, but the unease in my chest wouldn't leave. Grace had left physically, but her reach was still here, finding cracks to exploit. The next blow came through neighbors. At the grocery store, an old friend of Laura's approached her with narrowed eyes. "I heard Colin has been unstable lately," she said. "Grace told us she was only staying to support you because he couldn't handle things. I'm so sorry you've been going through that." Laura came home furious, throwing her keys on the counter. "She's poisoning everyone," she cried. "She's making them think you're the problem." I felt my jaw tighten, but I forced myself to stay calm. "That's her game," I said. "If she can't take the house legally, she'll take it socially. She'll make everyone look at us like we're broken so she can swoop back in as the savior." Laura buried her face in her hands. How did I ever believe her lies? I didn't have an answer for that. I only knew we couldn't fight shadows with silence anymore. The following week, a letter arrived from a credit card company. It claimed we had applied for a new line of credit, but the application had been denied due to excessive debt. Neither of us had applied. My heart sank as I realized the implications. Grace still had copies of our information. Those nights she had photographed our mail, those times she had sat at the desk whispering into her phone. It hadn't just been for show. She had built a file on us, and now she was using it. I spent the next 2 days on the phone with banks, credit bureaus, and our lawyer. We froze our credit, filed reports, and locked down every account we could. Each call was exhausting, draining the last of the patience I had carried for months. But with every measure we put in place, I felt the grip of her hands on our lives loosen a little more. Laura, meanwhile, struggled with the emotional aftermath. At church, whispers followed her. Old friends looked at her with pity. When she invited a neighbor over for coffee, they declined politely, but with that same look, the look that said they believed Grace's version of the story. Laura cried in the evenings, confessing how ashamed she felt. "She's not just stealing from us," she said one night. "She's stealing me from everyone else. She's making them believe I don't see what's happening." I pulled her close and told her the truth. "They'll see in time." Hurting. To ease the weight on her, I started sharing the recordings with our lawyer, who encouraged us to keep documenting everything. "The stronger the record," he told us, "the harder it will be for her to twist anything. If she tries to take you to court, you'll already have the high ground." For a few weeks, we lived in that constant state of defense, securing finances, repairing Laura's trust with friends, double-checking the locks, saving every scrap of paper that came in the mail. Slowly, Laura began to find her footing again. One night she sat with me on the couch, not the couch I had been banished to, but the couch where we now chose to sit together, and said, "I want to fight this, Colin. Not just defend ourselves, fight back, for us." That was the moment I realized we weren't just surviving anymore, we were planning. The next morning, Laura took a step I didn't expect. She called her sister. She put the phone on speaker, and when Grace answered with her smooth, practiced tone, Laura's voice cut through like steel. "You will not come near this house again. You will not speak for me. And you will not spread lies about my husband. If you try, we have everything recorded. Every word, every move. I was blind before, but I see now, and I won't let you take anything else from us." Grace tried to argue, her voice rising with fury, but Laura ended the call with one sharp click. She turned to me with tears in her eyes, but this time they weren't tears of guilt. They were tears of resolve. "She doesn't own me anymore," Laura said. "She doesn't own us." That night, for the first time in a long time, I slept without waking to check the cameras. The house still had scars, emotional ones, invisible but real. But it was ours again, and the shadows Grace had cast no longer controlled us. Still, in the back of my mind, I knew she wasn't finished. People like Grace don't let go. They wait, they plan, and they strike when you least expect it. But now, Laura and I weren't separate, silent, or blind. We were together, we were prepared, and we were ready for whatever she tried next. And that was the difference. She had underestimated us before. She wouldn't get that chance again. Months passed, and the shadows Grace left behind finally began to lift. The locks had been changed, the accounts secured, and Laura's trust in me was stronger than it had been in years. We had even started laughing again. Small, ordinary laughter at the dinner table, the kind that makes a house feel alive. For a while, I believed the storm had ended, but storms don't end quietly when someone like Grace is involved. It was early on a Thursday morning when the letter arrived. A thick envelope with legal markings sat in our mailbox. Laura opened it with shaky hands, and inside was a notice. Grace was her last card, the one she had been holding back. If she couldn't steal the house from inside its walls, she would try through the courts. We brought the letter straight to our lawyer, who skimmed through it with a dry smile. "This won't stand," he said. "She has no ownership, no legal claim, nothing on paper that connects her here. What she does have, though, is the ability to make noise, so we'll fight noise with evidence." And fight we did. When the court date came, Laura and I walked into the small county courthouse together. Grace sat at the other table, her hair perfectly styled, her smile polished as if she truly believed she was about to win. She spoke with confidence, telling the judge how she had moved in only to help us, how she had supported Laura while I was unstable, and how she had acted in our best interest. She painted herself as a savior, a woman who had been unfairly cast out after months of sacrifice. But then our lawyer stood, turned on the projector, and pressed play. First came the locksmith footage. Grace whispering, "Make sure I'm the primary contact." Then the kitchen scene. "By next week, the house will be secured under my control." Finally, the notary rehearsal. His name off, my name on, his rights void. The courtroom grew so quiet I could hear the hum of the air vent. Grace's smile faltered, her hands twitching as she realized every word, every whisper, every plan had been captured. Laura spoke next. Her voice trembled at first, but then it grew stronger. She told the judge how Grace had manipulated her, how she had pushed me to the couch for months, how she had isolated us from friends and neighbors. "I see it now," Laura said, tears streaming down her face. "She didn't want to help me. She wanted to erase him." The judge didn't need long. The claim was dismissed, and Grace was warned that any further harassment could result in charges. She stormed out of the courtroom, her heels striking the floor like angry hammers. For the first time, I saw her without power, stripped of control, exposed for exactly what she was. When we walked out into the sunlight, Laura slipped her hand into mine. "It's over," she whispered. And this time, I believed her. That night, I sat on the couch, this time by choice, and watched as Laura cooked us dinner. The cameras were still there, tucked into corners, silent watchers. They weren't just for security anymore. To me, they were a reminder. Silence had once been my weakness, but it had also been my weapon. By staying quiet and gathering truth, I had reclaimed not only my house, but my marriage too. Grace never came back after that. Word spread quickly in town about the court case, and the lies she had told about me dissolved under the weight of what people had seen. Neighbors who had turned away started greeting us again. Friends came back for dinners. Bit by bit, our place in the community returned. 1 year later, the couch sat empty most nights. Laura and I had repainted the guest room, changing it from a space of whispers and secrets into a small library with shelves of books. It no longer carried Grace's shadow. Instead, it carried peace. And as for me, I never stopped being cautious. The cameras remained, the files remained, but now they weren't just for protection. They were a reminder of the truth I had once been forced to prove. No matter how convincing a lie may sound, the truth will always wait patiently in silence, ready to be revealed. So, if you're still listening, take this from my story. Protect your home, protect your peace, and don't ignore the small signs when something feels wrong. Silence can be dangerous, but in the right moment, it can also be the most powerful weapon you have. If this story kept you listening until the end, please give the video a like. It helps more than you know. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories, and let us know in the comments. What would you have done if your own family tried to take your house away? Thank you for watching, and until the next story, take care of yourselves and never stop protecting what truly belongs to you.